guys! This year I set myself a challenge to read 52 books, so one book for every week of the year, and I did it! This is the first time I've met my reading challenge, which is kind of affiliated with Goodreads. You can keep track of all of the books that you've been reading there, and then they send you at the end of the year, once you've completed the challenge, or I think even if you haven't completed the challenge, an overview of all of the books that you've read. And I was looking back over that and I found it quite interesting, and I wanted to share with you my highs and lows from this year. I read a few books kind of vilifying foods. The first was The Dorito Effect, which talked about the flavourings that are added into food. I also read Wheat Belly, which is about gluten and the menace of wheat, and The Case Against Sugar, which I'm still reading at the moment, is again about how bad sugar is for you. So there was definitely a theme of demon food books this year. I also read several books on farming. I read The Olive Farm by Carol Drinkwater, and that was the first in a series, so I'm looking forward to reading the rest of those. And then I had a shepherd theme going on. I read a few books. I read The Yorkshire Shepherdess, Shepherd's Life, and Up with the Lark. I think once you read a book that you enjoy, you tend to end up looking for more books along that theme, and I definitely had a shepherd theme for part of the year. Some other books that I enjoyed were about walking and travel. The one I probably enjoyed the most was Wild by Cheryl Stade, and then I read another walking book, The Journey in Between by Keith Fawcett, and a couple of other books about adventure and travel was Walden on Wheels and The Accidental Adventurer, which was by Ben Fogle, who was, back when I was younger, he was on the TV show Castaway, a BBC show, and I've kind of followed his career since, and this was a roundup of all of the adventure and travel that he's done. It was really interesting. The book that's probably stayed with me the most, was quite haunting and a difficult read, was I Never Gave My Consent by Holly Archer, which is about a child sex ring, and it's a true life story. It's her account, and she lived in my hometown. She's only a few years younger than me. It was the same schools and parks and things that I went to. It was an interesting read, interesting to see how she ended up getting involved with it, but it's very harrowing and it's really stayed with me. I also read loads of non-fiction books. I really enjoyed science fiction. I read a lot of Terry Schott and Kim Stanley Robinson. I also read quite a bit by Cathy Bramley, who's kind of a new author to me the last year or so. She writes about gardening and food and restaurants and allotments, and all her characters just seem like people I would love to be friends with. So I've read a few of her books this year. The books that I didn't really enjoy were the ones I felt were probably overhyped, and I read them because I'd heard a lot about them but then just didn't enjoy them. One of those was Sapiens, which is a kind of anthropological study of humankind, but I was thinking it would be more like a biological evolutionary book, and it wasn't. It was much more based on like sociology and studies of people, but I felt that I don't know, I didn't enjoy the examples. There were so many hypothetical examples in it, and it's meant to be a history of humankind. There just should be more real life examples to draw on. None of the ideas in it to me were new. It wasn't anything that I hadn't heard of before, and I didn't understand why everyone was talking about it so much. Similar to that was A Man Called Ove. I read that because there was going to be an online book club, and then it never materialised, but I read it in preparation for that, and it's about a grumpy old man who turns out he's got a reason that he's a bit grumpy and he's had a bit of a hard life. It just seemed very obvious and I didn't enjoy it very much. There was one book that I didn't enjoy to the point that I didn't even finish it. I came across this book on NetGalley, which is a place where you can get advanced reader copies of books, and you kind of have to apply for them, and if they're relevant to other books that you've read, then the publisher will say, yes, you can review this book for us. So this book was called The Baking Powder Wars, and it's about the history of baking powder. It starts off very, very detailed, and maybe part of the problem was that it was a lot of American brands, and they weren't household names that I recognised. It's definitely well researched, it's packed full of history, but there's there was some kind of imbalance in it for getting like an exciting story across and just a dense load of history, and I found it really jarring and I couldn't finish it. It was kind of dry. My two absolute favourite books of the year both happen to be about women in science, and I read them quite close to each other. The first was Lab Girl by Hope Jahren, and she's a geochemist and a lot of her work is based around trees. I found it really interesting, and it talked about how she goes through her life from studying to setting up a lab and fundraising. It's just a really interesting behind the scenes look at what goes on in the science world and running a lab. And the other book, probably my favourite of the whole year, was Braiding Sweetgrass. I absolutely loved this book. I listened to this book on Audible, and it's read by the author Robin Wall Kimmerer, and her voice is so poetic. And this book is Indigenous wisdom meets scientific knowledge, and how she marries the two. It's just beautiful, and she reads it so eloquently. It is kind of lyrical and sing-songy, but at the same time it's discussing science, and it's just a really beautiful read. I can't recommend it enough, and it's one that I'll definitely like to come back to, and I'll probably listen to it again. In 2018, I am going to set myself the same challenge again, to read 52 books in a year. It usually takes me about 2 weeks to read a book and 2 weeks to listen to a book, so it works quite well. Probably half and half read and half listened to. And you can follow along on Goodreads. I'm going to try this year and write more reviews. I feel like I just use it at the moment to check off when I've read a book, but I think it would be nice to do some proper reviews on there. And of course there's the Foodie book club that is on this channel. I got a couple of books for Christmas, which are going to be some of the first that I read this year. So the first one is Healing Mushrooms. I actually got some mushroom tea to go with this one. And the next one is No Dig Organic Home and Garden, which is by Charles Dowding and Stephanie Hafferty. So it's kind of a mix about gardening, but there's some recipes in there as well, so I'm quite looking forward to that one. Do let me know in the comments what books you plan to read this year, and I'll see you again soon. Happy New Year, guys! Bye bye!